Hello, Dena. Welcome to the podcast.
Cassie, it's so nice to see you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I am thrilled. As I mentioned off camera, one of my previous clients said they saw you speak in person. It was just, they were completely wowed. And so I'm so honored to have you here to share your career journey story with us.
Thanks. This is exciting. This is exciting for us as well.
So let's dive in. And I'm curious how you would define or describe your role as a food systems researcher and science filmmaker.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm a full-time researcher at Rutgers University. First and foremost, I have the honor of overseeing the Rutgers Immersive Learning through Science Storytelling Research Lab, where scientists and students come together to produce what we call authentic science film stories that include the documenting of ongoing scientific research in a variety of areas. But I also co-lead food security projects in the Federated States of Micronesia as part of a Rutgers Food Systems Science team. Is that
That's
succinct enough?
incredible. Yes, that's incredible. And so, for the food systems element of this, what kind of data are you collecting?
Right, right. So, yeah, so in the Federated States of Micronesia, we are collecting data from the farmers and fishers. So the country is actively working to build their food system, which is very, very interesting and fascinating. I actually have my graduate degree is in anthropology. And so I get to work with the indigenous farmers and fishers and through the local NGOs there, we're collecting data on how climate change is impacting their ability to grow and produce food and also their aspirations for growing food for the market. So those are survey tools, but at the same time, as a science filmmaker, when I go there, I have the honor of also videotaping interviews with the farmers and fishers, as well as the traditional leaders, and I get to film them doing their traditional farming and agricultural and agroforestry practices. And all of that footage concurrently, we shape into what we would call an authentic science documentary about their processes, the challenges they face, and their aspirations. And we call all the footage, that science film footage, our data. And here in our immersive learning through science storytelling lab, we have several thousand hours of science video data that includes the footage from our partnerships in Micronesia. And we invite students into this lab to work with that video data as a way of learning new bodies of knowledge. So shaping stories, and our stories we make here are told only in the voices of the people who are in that film. So either the farmers, the fishers, or the scientists. And that requires our students to really listen and learn to people
Mm.
that are experiencing and or practicing, experiencing real world challenges, having real world aspirations, and or practicing authentic science. So those sort of day-to-day choices and challenges, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's so much power and emotion behind seeing something versus
100%.
just reading or looking
Oh,
at a graph.
100%. It's not just the seeing, Cassie, of course, it's the voices, right? Their
Yeah.
emotion, what they need, what they want. And we find that our students get very, very, I don't know if attached is the right word, but feelings of responsibility to the people that we document, right? Because those people have
Mm.
invited us into their lives. They're sharing with us their goals, their aspirations, the work that they're doing. And there's a tremendous amount of trust there. And so our students really understand the importance of that trusting partnership. And we really co create with the people whose stories we are honored and allowed to document. So our scientists get to approve the stories about their research before those stories are shared with the public, as are the farmers and fishers and traditional leaders we work with in Micronesia.
Mm. I'm so excited to dive even deeper into this. Before we do, though, I want to ask you a little bit about what your typical day is. And let's, in this
Oh,
case, maybe we should break it up. So maybe a typical day when you're on campus, like right now, versus when you're in Micronesia doing field work. So what are each of those days like?
sure. I mean, okay, so I guess I should start by saying, as you identified, my work does require that I travel. And so I often do field work either in the Federated States of Micronesia, but even when I'm on campus, I may be on a documentary shoot that could be in labs or field sites with the scientists and or farmers or fishers in New Jersey, or perhaps at
Hmm.
sea on research vessels, and or at meetings and interviewing scientists at partnering universities. So my need to travel even requires me to move around our university. But as you identified, the majority of my time is here at Rutgers, and I'm actually in the plant biology department. And so, if I were to describe a typical day, it always includes juggling multiple projects and multiple deadlines. So right now, I'm a full-time researcher, but my work is entirely grant funded. So my time must include writing and submitting grants, grant proposals, uh, and I also work on state and national projects for the Federated States of Micronesia, which is 15 hours ahead of New Jersey. So my mornings
Hmm.
and evenings are often spent Zooming, reviewing projects, emailing our colleagues in Micronesia. So, for instance, I was up until midnight last night sending out emails and reports. We're doing food security policy work for Micronesia. So I have to get those out in the evening because it'll be the morning for our colleagues in
Hmm.
Micronesia. If I want to speak to them um, in their waking evening, I have to get up at 6 in the morning to do that. We have several projects here in our lab. Um, and part again, as they're all dependent on grant, my day will begin with reviewing grant proposals, meeting with our team on documentary projects, and one-on meetings with our students. So we have several projects in the lab with varying degrees of deadlines. Our largest project right now is a feature-length documentary about scientists studying how biological communities form at deep sea volcanoes. And these are the hydrothermal vents of the East Pacific Rise. And the film is called Mysteries of Nine North, which is partially funded by the National Science Foundation. So as soon as you and I are done with this interview, I'll begin working on that project because we have a deadline. Our first screening is August 8th. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's so exciting that you have that coming up. Now, is that screening open to the public? Like, are they able to watch?
Yeah, so that screening, it's a work in progress screening. It will be at the Woods Hole Science Walk. So our film features the Atlantis research vessel and the Alvin submersible, all of which are stationed at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And so this film is really a partnership with Rutgers and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. So the Woods Hole has a science walk, which is a time when the town invites people to come and learn about ocean science. And so they've opened that theater for us to give two screenings. I don't have the exact days of those screenings yet, but if you go to the Woods Hole Science Walk, you'll be able to see those screenings. If you're in Woods Hole, it is open to the public and you can register. We're hoping to have this feature film finally finished by um, the end of this year or uh, early next year.
Oh, that's so exciting. And so I got the feeling I saw this seminar series and it was featuring the storytelling of a bunch of students that worked with you. So is that part of your job too? Is mentorship and advising students on their projects?
100%. And that's actually part of my research is studying how our students learn new bodies of knowledge through science storytelling, right? And so, and also basically how they understand the scientific process. We document the scientific process, right, in our stories. So that's really our science in action storytelling model that I've had the honor to develop here at Rutgers over almost 20 years now. Really takes the scientific method and embeds it in story form, right? So all
Hmm.
science is a story. Scientists have wants and questions and goals. And then of course their process to testing their method, their hypothesis. We sort of see it as that second act. It's their journey of exploration. And then what have they learned from the data they collected is somewhat of the climax. And then of course the reflection of what they've learned over time, how characters change over time. Um, is kind of that final chapter. And so students who may not feel that they belong in science, we find this an exciting way to invite them into the science world, to partner with scientists to really see science as a story, but in the process, of course, understand the scientific method, understand the scientific process. And the students that work here all have a real passion for helping the public audience understand the importance of science. So my research very much involves STEM learning for diverse bodies of students. And I partner with some amazing people. This lab is 100% team driven. And I just want to shout out to Zania Morin and Marissa Staffen, who are my STEM learning partners. And they've really taught me to understand this method of co-creating authentic science film stories as an innovative path toward immersive science learning for students, right? So they are measuring how our students learn. So I would say perhaps, for me, the most rewarding and enjoyable part of the work that I do, in addition to the actual filmmaking and meeting the scientists, is really watching my students grow and learn and staying in touch with some of these students that I had 10 to 15 years ago and seeing where they are now. That's just wonderful and impactful, and it keeps me going for sure.
Oh, that's beautiful. As a former faculty member myself, I remember showing them. So I don't know, I had the foresight to do this back in my PhD, but I did these little video vlogs of, my field work. So I studied bog turtles in the middle of the mountains in Tennessee and Virginia.
Amazing.
Yeah, and nobody could quite understand. You spent all day out in the bog and you got 3 samples? I was like, yeah. And that's the majority of the population at this site. That's like, 50 acres. And so I have these vlogs of me just sweating profusely and just covered in poison sumac rashes and just saying, I've been out here for 5 hours. And I've yet to see a turtle. And so people started to really get it because now they're sort of in my waders, if you will, and in that experience with me. And it was so fun. And then I got smart and I now have a dog that I've trained to help me track turtles. In that same site, 30 minutes, we had a turtle. So yeah, we got smart.
You have a good partner. But that video you captured of your process is also evidence of your process, right? And it helps authenticate what you do, the challenges that you face in collecting that data, and why it takes so long.
Absolutely.
But it also invites people into that world, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's exciting that you got to do this work, and it helps me. You're inviting me to join that journey with you when you videotape and share.
And absolutely, just like in food systems, it's the same in conservation biology. You really need public and community buy-in to make anything successful. So the 100%. More that you can bring them into the story, the better. So, yeah. Well, you've already revealed that one of the most enjoying aspects of what you do is the students and the growth and learning that they have. They're still in touch with you years later. Is there anything else that stands out as one of the most appealing parts of your work?
So, I mean, I have just this incredible honor of getting to enter many different worlds as a science filmmaker, right? And so being able to learn many, many different disciplines by being invited in and being embedded in science teams and documenting their process and learning. So I've been able to work closely with farmers and fishers in New Jersey whose lives I never would have understood before. But earning their trust is tremendous. Earning the trust of the scientists is tremendous. And then learning what they do is amazing, right? So I have just been able to learn about so many different science disciplines because of these many varied partnerships in the science film storytelling. I've also had the honor to go to Antarctica and spend 6 weeks on a research vessel and direct a feature film there. I've been honored to spend a month on the Atlantis research vessel and travel with Dr. Costa Vetriani in the Alvin submersible down to active volcanoes at the East Pacific Rise. I mean, I've gotten to do some very amazing things as part of my responsibility to document and communicate science.
That's so incredible. I was thinking the other day as my kid's about to graduate kindergarten that someday, many years from now, when I'm sitting on the front porch, like what stories I'd be telling my grandkids someday. And I can't imagine the swath of stories that you have that you've already told and have yet to tell. It's incredible.
It's an honor. I mean, every opportunity I have to always just remember just how lucky I am. But it isn't the luck; it's the responsibility as well. And
Mm.
I think I felt that so deeply when I was on the Atlantis. Just how much work, how many many years, and how many shoulders we're standing upon at the ingenuity of not just the vessel, but the Alvin submersible and all the different science disciplines that are coming together to answer this very complex research question, which for that particular expedition was how biological communities form at active hydrothermal events at active deep sea
Mm.
volcanoes. It was just, I really could think of sort of the culmination and collaboration of so many people that come together to answer big questions. And we must work in teams, and we must share knowledge,
Mm.
and we must collaborate in order to answer and tackle some of these extremely big problems that our planet and our society is facing.
I agree with that so wholeheartedly. And it's interesting how we train a lot of our scientists. So they go through a master's, maybe a PhD, but at least from my experience and a lot of the experience of the clients that I've worked with, it's you and only you with some input from an advisor and a committee, but you're responsible for doing all the steps, all the components of your project. And I remember in my PhD, did conservation genomics and looking at parentage of these turtles and looking for inbreeding depression and things like that. And I just remember thinking, someday when I'm a bigwig scientist, I will never do bioinformatics again. I will find a collaborator that loves that stuff. But it's just interesting that it doesn't happen until, for a lot of folks, it doesn't happen until after. And I had tons of collaborations in the field, though. I
Mhm.
collaborated with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park, local state agencies, nonprofits. But when it came to the project as a whole, it's not the same as after I graduated. What do you think about sort of how we're training our students to be collaborative?
Well, I can say that here in my lab, our students work in teams, and that's critical. And
Good.
again, I do want to uh, honor all the scientists that have made this lab possible, because they see the tremendous importance of the public understanding science, trusting science, believing in science, and also showing that science can be welcoming community, right? There is a culture of
Mm.
science. Here in the plant biology department that I work in, or at least in the lab that I work in, and this is under Dr. Jim Simon, who I absolutely must honor here, because if it were not for him, we would not have this lab. He has
Mm.
been the greatest champion of building this lab for the benefit of all scientists, not just the plant scientists that he is part of, right? So understanding
Mm.
that we need to broaden participation in science, welcome people into science, and this is a pathway to excite students, especially those who maybe don't come from science backgrounds and may feel they don't belong in science. Right? We have really
Mhm.
seen a lot of students come through our lab here, work on these projects, and then be inspired to have a STEM path, a STEM trajectory when
Mhm.
that wasn't there. They didn't have that confidence prior. So going back to Dr. Jim Simon, and I am part of his team here at Rutgers Plant Biology Department, and he has one wing of this building. It's tremendously collaborative. Everybody is working
Mhm.
in teams. It's just the way he thinks. And he also leads our food system projects in Micronesia. And his model there is 100% community led, meaning we can't build anything until we know what the people, the farmers and fishers, the community actually need and want. What plants
Mm.
do they want to grow? What's culturally, environmentally relevant? What challenges are they facing? What support do they need? So he only thinks in teams, and he builds multiple different interdisciplinary teams. And we do that as well here in our lab. So I can't speak to um, how other scientists might be trained in a more siloed way. What I can share is my experience here at Rutgers. So I first came in as faculty in the English department, and I was building filmmaking as creative writing classes, which included
Mm.
a course called documentary filmmaking for writers. But my experience in the English department was very much a culture of individual authorship, right? So the
Mm.
faculty worked on their own books, their own particular research. They did not work in teams. Then from there, I was faculty in our art school here, where I built the BFA in film program, and that was exciting, and we had many wonderful students. But again, it was about individual authorship. People were not working in
Mm.
teams, except I would say perhaps in the music department because you've got ensembles, right? Or in the theater department because um, you have people working in plays. But I was in the visual arts, and that was very much about individual authorship. My personal experience is that here in the School of Biological and Environmental Sciences, it's not just Dr. Simon, but also the colleagues I work with in our marine science department. These are team players. They think in teams, they build teams, and they've always welcomed me
Mm.
as a team member. And so I replicated that for the students, right? To be able to invite them as science storytellers to be members of science teams. And I facilitate that entry for them in those partnerships. So my experience in the sciences here, at least in the environmental biological sciences, with my colleagues here has been very much about building interdisciplinary teams to tackle complex problems. And of course, we have to build those teams when we write our grant proposals as
Mm-hmm.
well. Does that answer your question?
It's beautiful. That's exactly how we should be proceeding and training this next generation of students. And I think as students listening to your story right now and that are thinking about grad school and what that training would look like, find a program like Dena's describing, because that's exactly what it's like on the other side in the real world, especially in the sciences. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about the shift from the English department into a science department. And it's really encouraging just to see this is sort of feels very much your home. It aligns with your values about what collaboration and storytelling looks like. It is a collaborative entity. So love it.
So certainly when it's science filmmaking, it has to be. And so, I mean, here's just the big, most obvious component to that is scientists do not and should not let anybody just come into their lab and start filming, right? That this is federally funded research. Video is a powerful tool that could be restructured to misrepresent their science, and this is their
Mhm.
life's work. So they should only allow someone in who is a collaborator, meaning,
Mhm.
so when we go in and we document their research, we interview them, we ask what they're doing, and we're doing it in real time, Cassie. It isn't interviews post discovery or post findings that are reflecting on their process. It's actually documenting their process in real time, which allows the audience to feel that they're there and that they've been invited into that process, right? So for scientists to actually allow you into the lab while they're actually doing the work, they have to know that that video data also belongs to them, and that they're going to have the opportunity to approve how we shape all this hours of footage into a story form. That's the
Mm.
co-creation and the collaboration. That's the trusting partnership. And that requires a team, right? That requires
Mhm.
a team to understand the mutual trust. And the trust also goes to us, the storytellers, meaning we're not at service to the scientists. They're not directing us. We have the creative authorship to tell a story in a creative way that we feel is most impactful. And
Mm-hmm.
they have the opportunity to review the science content and communicate whether it's accurate. So that's that mutual respect that
Yeah.
is part of that team building, right?
Well, and I appreciate you sort of outlining what that collaboration looks like, because now I can really picture it too. Um, I do want to ask you, since we've focused earlier on the appealing aspects of your job, no job is perfect. So I want to ask you the flip as well. What do you find the most challenging or less appealing about your role?
I mean, I would say my role right now, while there's so many things I love and I feel 100, I feel just so honored and grateful to do what I do. The challenge is, of course, keeping it going and supporting it. As I shared, we are grant supported. And so while I enjoy and don't mind writing grants, and the part I enjoy is that we work in teams of scientists who are smart and passionate about collaborative work. It is a bit of an emotional roller coaster to pump out grant proposals, and they don't always all get awarded, right? So getting news
Mm-hmm.
that the grant that our team has worked on around the clock, often giving up precious family time to just focus on making this grant perfect and submit it, and then find out it wasn't funded. This is always disappointing. It's always like,
Mm-hmm.
there's always this like moment of just sadness and what am I doing with my life? Um, but we have to continue, and our team works very, very hard to stay competitive and do excellent work. So I would say that
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it. At the same time, I have to give a shout out to our donors. We have alumni donors, Penny and Don Prey, who support this lab, and if it weren't for them, we would not be able to continue going. So yeah, I guess I would say finding out that our grants, writing grants all the time and finding out that they're not awarded is less appealing. I do wish, we do hope to be getting more institutional support at some point.
Yeah. I'm curious how the current funding landscape has impacted you all. Has it been harder to find grants you're eligible for? Has it been harder to land the grants that you're eligible for?
Yes, 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 and yes. So,
Hmm.
I mean, we continue writing and we diversify. And again, my team is led by Dr. Jim Simon, he's writing grants, I would say, 10 times more than most faculty. It's just constant.
Mm.
And he doesn't give up, and he's a very optimistic person. So sometimes, I would say he and colleagues like Oscar Schofield, who's our chair of our marine science department, who's also just an aggressive grant writer and a very much very much concerned about the greater public understanding the importance of ocean and ocean science.
Mm.
Um, they're optimistic people who look at obstacles as opportunities. So I
Mm.
can't always do that, but they do. So basically, it's not just that the grants are less, and that the typical funding pathways, say NSF used to have a division called Advancing Informal STEM Learning, which would support
Mm.
science film storytelling, right? That whole division is now archived. It just doesn't exist
Mm.
anymore, right? So that's no longer a pathway. That was the division that funded the film I did in Antarctica, for instance. Um, but at the same time, there's greater need for increasing public trust in science because there has been a decrease in public trust in science,
Mhm.
right? So more people we just have to stay aware of who cares and
Mhm.
who wants to support the work that we do, and we just keep moving forward. So I
Mm.
do know that the work that I do, at least in our storytelling lab, supports many different disciplines. And so often, the work that we do here gets built into project proposals, right, as the broader impact component. I don't know how to answer it other than,
Yeah.
this is the biggest, what drives the work I do, of course, is the overall, I guess, decreased understanding or public trust in science. And I mean, one very big thing that happened, you might be aware of, just last week it was announced that NSF is now actively disassembling the ocean
Mm,
observation system, right? So that's
yeah.
900 ocean instruments that have been collecting critical ocean data about our climate, that's used for predicting hurricanes, that's used for understanding ocean acidification, the changes to the thermohaline circulation system and the conveyor belt of heat that's going toward, the Gulf Stream that's moving toward Europe, sea level rise. The ocean is 70% of our planet and it's absorbing 90% of the sun's heat. So not understanding changes in the ocean means that we don't really understand how our planet is changing, right? With all this
Yeah.
CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's interesting to see who's stepping up to say, well, let's try and protect this, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not
Yeah.
sure I answered your question, but we
Well,
just
it's
have to
been,
keep trying, and I guess the people that uh, care continue working in teams, and we continue dedicated to what we believe in.
yeah, agreed. And I think private sectors, nonprofits, even the general public, several have stepped up knowing that the traditional federal funding isn't there like it used to be. And so it's interesting to see that. And I
Yeah,
wish it were more, but it's still encouraging to see that there are groups that still, really believe in this and the importance of it. And what you're doing is, like you said, just so critical for science understanding and trust. And when you can get in the lab and sort of see the process happening, it's pretty impressive. And so I think you being able to capture that is incredible. And then, of course, coordinating with the scientists to make sure their work is represented in the way they intended is great.
sure, absolutely.
Um,
It's impressive because of the methods, of course, the instrumentation, the science. But what's most impressive, again and again, are the scientists, their motivation,
mm,
their dedication, and their passion, and that's what a broader audience can connect with.
agreed. So I'm going to take a sharp left here, and we're going to go way back in time to
Okay.
your early childhood years. What was the first thing you ever remember wanting to be career wise?
So I had an amazing biology teacher in sixth grade who introduced me to microscopes and cell biology and environmental science, and I just thought this world was just fascinating, and this is what I wanted to be. But both my parents were artists, and I did not have a
Mm,
lot of support in my science path, which is so funny because I have so many students now who tell me exactly the opposite, that their parents don't want them to take any art classes or film classes and want to stay very focused on their STEM trajectories. I had really the opposite background. So um, my father wanted me to be a filmmaker, and I
mm.
wound up pivoting towards science films, and now I feel like I've kind of merged the two. So yeah, I guess that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, take us through, for those that aren't familiar, just through the major milestones from high school on. So the
Mm.
major jobs you had or education programs that you did.
So I don't mean to diss formal education, but I think some of the most formative experience in my life were outside of
Mm,
education. After high school, I spent a year and a half abroad, and I was living with a farming family in Greece. And it's so interesting now that I'm working with island farming families again all these years later. So
mm,
that was really transformative for me because working with communities that are connected 100% to the land and the ocean, and all the work that we did was based on the seasons, and all the food we were eating we were either growing or harvesting either from the land or the ocean. So that was truly formative. I was a film major in college and an anthropology minor, and while I was in my undergraduate at Bard College, I had an internship which was just completely serendipitous. It was just sort of a roundabout path that I got access or invited to do an internship in New York City at a documentary film editing company called Valken Films. And
Mm.
there were many National Geographic and documentary science films being edited. So I did an internship that summer, and then when I graduated, I was hired as an assistant editor, and I immediately began working on films for National Geographic. There I met a filmmaker named Jim Lipscomb, who I want to just honor and say was the most influential mentor of my life. Wonderful man. We worked on two big 2-hour specials for the Discovery Channel. But most importantly, he comes from that early cinema verite documentary world. He was trained by Robert Drew, who was the founder of Direct Cinema. He worked with the Maisel
Mm.
brothers. So when he would give me footage, it was hundreds of hours of footage, and this was shot in film. So the very first film I got to work with him, I was the editor of a 2-hour special called Carrier Fortress at Sea, and I had 300 hours of footage. He had spent months on an aircraft carrier and just had all this footage, and I got to shape it again only in the voices of the pilots. And but it went everybody. It was everybody. It was down to the folks that were working in the kitchens and cleaning the toilets and missing their families. And he just captured everything. And we shaped that story, and it won Best Documentary in the Emmys that year.
Wow.
And so that process that I learned from him, I mirrored when I went on the ship in Antarctica, when I was on the ship on the Atlantis for the hydrothermal vents. We filmed everybody. Everybody matters. It's a community. And I want to thank you for the opportunity for this interview, because it's been a long time that I've honored Jim Lipscomb, and I realized I need to put a picture of him up here because he
I love
trusted
that.
me and he taught me,
Mhm.
and he was just a wonderful, wonderful man. He was also a sailor, and he made several films about the ocean. So there's many, many ways in which he influenced in my life. So this was really
Mhm.
my real education. And now when we take the hundreds of hours of footage that I have here in the lab, and we call it science video data, and all of our students are required to make the stories in the voices of the people in the footage, not narrated, to actually listen and learn, um, and tell stories that are real time, not past tense stories. And this is also critical, even from just like a neuroscience perspective, that it
Mhm.
allows our audience to feel that they're there rather than they're being told a story that somebody else got to experience. It allows the audience to identify with the characters and feel that they're a part of that process. So we
Mhm.
believe that's very much connected to the audience increased relatability in the scientists, sense of belonging in science, and understanding of science process.
And I've never been on one of those ships for an extended period of time. But when you're out there on the ocean, I can imagine that everybody's mingling. It's not like the clique of scientists is separate from all the cooks and stuff. You just all become a crew together. And I think that's really, really powerful. There's still people through my field work that I'm still in touch with. And some of them were just the techs that worked on the radio telemetry units. It's not like they were out there every day with me, but you just build such strong relationships. And it's just affirmation that when you go along your journey, it's less about the courses you take and the projects you work on. It's more about who are those professors, those mentors, and who are those people that you collaborated with on those projects and the relationships you built. Those are the things that we tend to cling to and remember.
Yeah, thank you for that. And something else that has occurred to me, when I was in film school, there were no women professors. I had all male professors. Of course, Jim Lipscomb was a man as well. I didn't have any women mentors, and that was something I'd always wished for. So
Hmm.
it's very important to me to be a supportive mentor to all my students. And it's very important to me to also empower women as filmmakers as well, not just as scientists, but as filmmakers. and storytellers. And we are a significant minority still in the filmmaking
Mm.
world. So it's just something that is really, I've become more and more aware of, and I feel it's a responsibility.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on this podcast, for sharing your story, for putting yourself out there, for mentoring all the students that you have, both directly and indirectly.
Thank you.
You've had,
Thank you.
like, for my client, you had such an impact on their life in terms of, wow, seeing this inspirational woman in a male-dominated field. It's just encouraging that you can see yourself in these roles is really important, to feel that sense of belonging and that you're being welcomed in that community. As a woman herpetologist, you can imagine that I'm one of the few studying snakes and turtles and stuff too.
There you
So,
go. Absolutely.
yeah. So it's so great what you do. And so as we close out this first part of the podcast, I want to give you an opportunity to talk to our listeners, those students and early career professionals who are interested in science filmmaking, and maybe specifically the food systems research that you're doing. What advice would you give them?
Well, I can give, I mean, my overall advice, I guess I would say to people is to figure out what matters to you, what you really care about.
Mm.
I mean, I don't want to sound trivial here, but you know, what burns in your heart? What do you want to spend your life working on? And then you need to find the people you want to work with, and be willing to work in a team, to give and take and support a team, so that collectively you can reach those goals that you all drive for. Teams are really,
Mm.
really important. And if you love the work that you do and the people you're with, it really isn't work. It's how you spend your life and who you want to be in the world. So that's
Mm.
broader. In terms of science filmmaking, what can I say? I mean, I think filmmaking, there's a lot of ways to learn that you could go to school, but many of my students come in with filmmaking skills that are just 100% self-taught, right? We
Mm.
all have these amazing cameras right now that are in our pocket and that are allowing us to get high quality image that when I was in film school was a real technical feat, right? When I was in film school, we
Mm.
were using film and light meters, and you had to understand how to process your own film footage. And it was just how to sync up sound and picture. It was a lot of technical steps that are no longer necessary. So we could really now be thinking about film language and how an audience will connect to scientists through film language. These are things I would encourage people to start thinking about and learning. Find a scientist that whose work you're passionate about, develop a trusting partnership, and explore the potential to help them communicate their story um,
Mhm.
in video form. I mean, that's just one way to begin. The food systems work was a very sort of long and winding path for me. I have a master's in anthropology. I took a break from Rutgers from 2015 to 2020. I left the art school where I was the director of the film program there, and I was offered a position as the director of the Okeanis Foundation for the Sea, which was bringing sustainable sea transportation to Pacific Island nations. And
Mm.
I did that for 5 years, making film stories along the way in terms of what the Pacific Islanders needed and wanted in terms of bringing food medicine to the remote islands and using their traditional seafaring ways, practices as part of that sustainable development goals. I became an ambassador at large to two of the governors of the Federated States of Micronesia, and those governors told me that food security was one of their primary goals. When the
Mm.
foundation I was working for decided it didn't want to work in the Pacific anymore, they moved to Europe. I was invited back to Rutgers to be part of this food system science team to develop these collaborations to support the Federated States of Micronesia. So that's an unusual path, and I don't know how to tell people to do that. But food systems, if you're interested in food systems work, it's incredibly important, right? And there's a number of ways to support food systems. We all need to eat. There's a number of challenges to our food systems throughout the US and globally. And so if you're interested in food system work, I will say our Rutgers agricultural program is phenomenal, and Dr. Jim Simon is 100% community focused and supporting communities, whether there's farming families here in the U.S. or in Africa or the Pacific Island nations. So come work with us here
Mm.
if you're interested
Yeah,
in
I
food.
love it. Wonderful.